Welcome to the psychic predictions for November 2025. These are predictions based off of visions that I have seen in meditation. So, the sense that I'm getting about this month coming up here, currently it is October 28th, but November feels very chaotic. Um, it seems to be the chaos of the year as far as the most kind of confusing month, politically speaking, that is. After November, I think things will start to cool off a little bit, but we've been seeing kind of a build-up. I've been talking about this for like the past 3 months or so, where I've been saying it's kind of like this storm building. November seems to be the peak of that. Um, in this video, I will be discussing the overall outlook for what's going on, coming world events. I will be discussing specifically Trump, Putin, Israel, Venezuela, Bitcoin predictions for November, stock market as well, and I will be going over past predictions that I made last month to see how they turned out, as well as talking about how those are shaping the future, where things are headed currently. And by the way, I just want to point out that these predictions are for the month of November specifically. A lot of people make predictions for the month, but they are just predictions for like any time between now and the next 3 years. I just want to make it clear that these are predictions for within the window of November exclusively. So the month starts off with chaos. I was seeing visions of people rushing around in business settings, and I was getting the sense of the markets, the stock markets, there being some sort of threat. I don't really see this necessarily ending with the stock markets just completely crashing, but it does seem that there is a big scare about that at least. And there could be some volatility at the beginning of November coming up here. Now, November is kind of a weird month because a lot of previous months I've had some pretty clear indications of what is to come. For November, it feels a little bit more wishy-washy in the sense that things are not fully settled, and it's kind of like we could go this way or we could go that way. The future isn't quite settled yet, in other words. But this feels like November is a very pivotal month in the sense that it determines big things. It determines whether or not we go into a serious war, world war, or if we kind of flirt with the idea of it but don't quite exactly go into full-blown world war. I don't see a nuclear holocaust or anything like that happening. I don't believe that we will get into a nuclear conflict with other countries. So that is the positive. I do get the sense overall that we are leaning more towards the direction of things not leading to a very detrimental World War III. As I've said before, I don't really necessarily think of it as World War III, although some may call it that. But from my perspective, I feel that we will almost reach World War III, but not quite. This seems to be a very pivotal moment within all of that. So years ago, I predicted that Poland would become a hot spot with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and I do believe that this is starting to play out in the news very, very lately, or very recently, I should say. And what I'm seeing for November is I was seeing the vision of jets coming from Russia. And we have already seen, drones over Poland or something like that. But I'm seeing jets from Russia going over Poland near Germany. I'm not sure exactly where, but that general area. Now, I wasn't sure. Again, this month seems kind of, it could go one way or it could go the other way. I'm not sure if this is a full blown attack or more of a threat. I feel like it could go either way, coming from Russia, which would be a pretty big deal. Um, but I don't think that it's going to cause a NATO reaction, a full blown NATO reaction, which would basically be World War III. I was getting the sense that this, for some reason, could involve oil somehow being linked to this situation. Either that, or this could just be a straight out bombing, which is possible. But I kind of don't think that it will result in actual bombings. So that was one vision I had for November. When I tuned into Trump, I saw him appearing very calm. Last month I said that I saw him getting angry, which I'll get to later because apparently there was an incident in the White House that happened. But regardless, this month he seems more calm moving into November, of course. Despite him being surrounded by people panicking, specifically investors, people involved with the financial markets, as well as politicians. They just seem to be panicking, worried about geopolitical conflicts going on in the world. It just seems very unstable in that way. But I don't see this being a bad month for Donald Trump overall. He seems to stand very confidently, regardless of the chaos going on. I was getting the sense of European economic worries becoming a major concern, though. And there could be some sort of attack, although I don't think this is going to be necessarily a literal attack as far as like a war strategy, but more like an economic situation that happens in Europe that Donald Trump is worried about. Well, I would say that most people are worried about, but that Donald Trump doesn't seem to be too worried about because he seems to, well, he's very confident, and I don't see him having much regret about what's going on or his strategies because he seems to have some sort of long-term goal that's working out for him involving these European countries. And I feel as though this plan is actually something he's been kind of thinking ahead towards. Not that he necessarily knew that this situation is going to happen, but he could kind of see that something like this was likely to eventually happen. And he's like a investor can take advantage of a negative situation. That's the sense that I was getting about him regarding Europe. And I get the sense that he's going along with this plan from November through December, so both months coming up here. That seems to be a thing going on for him. So last month, I did see him getting very angry. That was for October, and there have been news reports since then about Donald Trump getting very angry at Zelensky in the White House and yelling. And I guess Zelensky had maps. He was trying to, he was pulling out maps and trying to show how Ukraine could win the battle against Russia. And apparently, according to reports on the news, Donald Trump took those maps and threw them across the room and was yelling. And at one point was reported to have said, Ukraine will be destroyed. And basically saying that Zelensky needs to sign the peace deal, which would entail Ukraine giving up some land to Russia. And apparently it got pretty heated in the White House. Donald Trump has other reasons to be angry as well. This is complicated, but it all kind of ties together. So, another big deal that you're not really hearing too much about in the news is that China is blocking the imports of metals to the US. Um, and these metals are necessary for building weapons to fund Ukraine, as well as for US weapon supplies as well, which would likely be used to attack China. Sorry about that. My computer was about to die, so I had to plug it in. But anyways, back to what I was saying. China is basically punishing the U.S. for the tariff situation, as well as blocking the U.S. ability to produce more weapons to help Ukraine, as well as the U.S. military themselves. So this is a bigger deal than the news seems to be letting out, within the U.S. at least, that is. So I think Donald Trump is mad partially because of that as well, which I think is what fueled some of that anger towards Zelensky. So he was successful with Israel, but there's a lot else going on behind the scenes that isn't really being talked about as much. I did also say last month that I saw Putin laughing at Donald Trump because Donald Trump's plans were not working out. And this basically seems to be the situation where Putin just walks away from Donald Trump's peace plans. And this is what I've been saying for literally years now, is describing the relationship between them, and the way that it shows up to me is they're standing side by side and Putin turns around and walks away. And that's the vision that I continuously see over and over, which I believe is currently the situation going on right now. Now, I also predicted, sort of predicted, I said Colombia and the cartels around Colombia are working through Venezuela. Ironically, most of the cartels are more so associated with Colombia than Venezuela, but for some reason we're focusing on Venezuela. And I did predict that before it happened 2 months ago, I think. I said that Colombia or Venezuela may be attacked, and that happened out of nowhere. This, I have to say, is not about drugs. There's something bigger going on here. And I already said that in the past. But recently, to confirm that, the news has come out saying that Donald Trump actually authorized covert CIA operations inside of Venezuela. This looks like there's a goal of overthrowing the president rather than stopping drugs getting into the U.S., because Colombia, many other places, are supplying drugs to the U.S., much more so than Venezuela. So this confirms what I was sensing, which is that this is different. What I said in the past was it was related to BRICS nations, specifically Russia and China. That's basically the bulk of what BRICS represents. Them being able to have access to the U.S. through Venezuela. And I was thinking more militarily speaking. However, recently, news has come out which shifts my view just a little bit. Now the news is talking about how there's a lot of oil in Venezuela, and this is related to that because with the situation with Russian oil being cut off in the U.S., basically we're not going to have much access to oil unless we find new sources of oil. And so in a way, Venezuela is kind of more allied with the BRICS nations. as I was reading in my previous reading. But it's not so much about the land itself, it's more about the oil. And so that oil, the U.S. doesn't want that oil going to the BRICS nations. We want that oil ourselves. And so that seems to be what this whole situation is really about. Now, moving forward, what I'm sensing about this is that I do see pressure building slowly in Venezuela, but I don't really see anything too major happening in the month of November coming up here. It seems as though later on this will probably blow up into a bigger situation. And I guess it's also been leaked that supposedly the CIA previously stopped Trump from overthrowing Venezuela in his first term, which kind of shows that it's really not about drugs. It's probably more about oil. So last month I also said that I saw an airplane dropping a bomb, and I got the sense that this was a US-backed conflict. On my Patreon page, I even posted about how this seems to be a US airplane that could be starting a new war, potentially. It seems that this is just a continuation of Venezuela, as we have seen many more Venezuelan drug boats being bombed. Drug boats, theoretically, although statistically speaking, suspicions of drug boats are usually 25% wrong. So that means if we bomb 4 boats, one of them is statistically speaking probably not what we thought they were. And I don't know how many boats the US has bombed, but it's been a good amount now. So not really sounding too good without doing an actual investigation before bombing, just my opinion. So I did say that last month I predicted there was something going on with Muslims that reminded me of Afghanistan, and I was saying I didn't know if it was literally Afghanistan or just like the Middle East or Muslims or something like that. But I believe that was kind of a nothing burger, but basically just the conflicts between Hamas and the Palestinians, where they were kind of clashing because Hamas kind of wants to continue fighting Israel, and then some other people or other Palestinians are opposed to the way that they're going about it. Internal conflicts that was going on. So I think that's all that was about. But India was a more interesting prediction that I made last month, where I said that India would be, or that Donald Trump would be making some sort of agreement with India, and that we could look at that and read in between the lines to see what Donald Trump is doing next. And that's the way that it showed up in the reading, and that's what I said last month. So what happened October 15th through the 16th, Donald Trump announced that India agreed to stop buying oil from Russia. But apparently India denied that conversation ever happened. So that's kind of an indication right there of where Donald Trump is headed. Later on in the month, October 21st, Trump called Modi, the president of India, and they discussed lowering tariffs on India if they agreed to reduce Russian imports. And then on October 22nd, there was another phone call where Donald Trump called again and described the conversation as great. And Modi apparently thanked Donald Trump for the greetings and for anti-terrorist cooperation. So apparently they're working together, or kind of agreeing to help each other fight what they call terrorists. So basically, my sense about this when I tune into this moving forward is that this is just a ploy by Trump to try and convert India to being allied with the U.S. because right now this seems to be a big theme for the month, for the general time we're in right now. Not necessarily just November coming up, but November is kind of like the main month of it, I guess you could say, where we're really seeing countries take sides. It's basically just like Western European countries versus BRICS nations, which is basically Russia and China and those who are allied with Russia and China. And we're just seeing countries kind of dividing, to opposite sides, kind of creating the chess game, so to speak, who's on whose side. So Trump is trying to pull India onto our side, or the U.S. European side, you could say. Yeah, from here I have some more predictions, but really quick, I forgot to mention earlier, if you are not subscribed, subscribe to this channel and give it a thumbs up. This channel is not monetized. I do not run ads. I only run my own ads talking about myself, but I don't have ads at the beginning or end of the video, so give this video a thumbs up if you appreciate that. And I appreciate that if you do that, so thank you. But moving on, I was seeing visions of Putin. He was snarling in these visions. He was very offensive, or in the sense that he was on offense in full-blown fight mode. That was the sense I was getting about his energy. And he seems to be pushing the world, pushing his enemies, you could say, as far as they can go, Europe, that would be, without invoking NATO. So he's pushing the boundaries as far as he can, but I don't see that NATO is quite responding in the way that would create World War III. But it's like the gray zone in between is the sense that I get about that. So that's what I think that will probably be tied into the vision that I saw earlier of airplanes going over more territory, but it could be probably bigger than just that as well. Last month I did also talk about I didn't talk about wildfires. I talked about how Ukraine would be hit hard in Kyiv and that there would be fires in Ukraine. And apparently for October in the news, there was widespread wildfires and Kyiv was attacked multiple times. So I wasn't really getting anything specifically about that situation with Ukraine, but I just assume that it's probably just going to continue on as it has been moving into November. But for Israel, I definitely get the sense of Netanyahu, or I guess he's called Bibi nowadays. I don't know. I just call him Netanyahu. But anyways, I was seeing him just like basically with his finger hovering over the attack button, basically, metaphorically speaking. So he's just really waiting to engage in more combat and planning for the peace deal to fall apart at any moment. And I'm not sure if it's going to happen in November. Previously, when I made the original prediction, I said that Israel may actually feel some damage after this peace treaty happens. I did predict that it would happen before it happened and that it wouldn't last. And I said that there would be damage on Israel as well. Somewhere between the end of October and the beginning of November. Now, it may not have happened in the exact sequence that I thought, but actually very early into October, Israel bombed Yemen. It feels like that was months ago, but apparently that was the beginning of October, where after Israel bombed Yemen to attack the main supply port for the Houthi rebels in the country, the Houthis fired back with a missile hitting Israel. There's probably multiple missiles. I'm not really sure. But anyways, they called it a victory for Gaza. And so Israel did get hit, as I said would happen in the month. It just happened earlier than I thought. And also going back to June of 2025, way back, I predicted that around September or so of this year, that there would be a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, where Ukraine would give up some of its land. And then right before September came, I said that I thought it would take a little bit longer, possibly into October. Now, that didn't quite happen. But what we did see instead was a peace deal between Israel and Hamas. So I may have just crossed those wires a little bit, and maybe it wasn't Ukraine and Russia, but it was the Israeli-Hamas peace deal. But either way, what I was saying, the outcome of that would be, months ago, back in June of this year, I said that regardless of the agreement, there would be continued fighting anyways. And I still believe that this is also true for the case of Russia and Ukraine. I've been saying this before June of 2025. I've been saying this for years now, that there will eventually be some sort of agreement between Ukraine and Russia, but regardless, the fighting will continue. And this may not be official governmental militaries fighting, but there will still be paramilitaries or organizations, militant organizations still fighting each other in Ukraine, even if there's a peace deal. I said a long time ago when it first started that it would last probably around 5 years or so. We've probably got a couple years left or so, I would say. So let's see here. So what happened with the situation in Gaza was that supposedly, according to the news, 2 Israeli military were killed by either Hamas or someone representing Hamas, or someone representing Palestinians in some way. And Israel responded with 12 airstrikes on Gaza, killing 88 Palestinians since the peace treaty. So not much of a peace treaty, if you ask me. I mean, I guess supposedly they're back in it again. We'll see how long that lasts. I predicted a backing of support for Israel last month from other countries. And I wasn't sure what countries, but now we see 200 U.S. troops have been deployed to southern Israel to help with the transition into this peace treaty. The sense that I get about all of this, it's very, very similar to the situation with Ukraine. It's almost like they're the same war, but in a different area. It's strange. But Netanyahu does not really seem to want peace with Gaza, and I don't think that this peace treaty will last for too long. I can't say if it's going to change in November or not. It may or may not. We already had the fight that I said I saw happening. I'm sure that eventually it will happen again. It may be longer than after November. But it could happen in November. It's very possible. So moving on to Bitcoin. Last month I said that there would be a sharp flash crash. I said it would be a sharp drop suddenly, and that it would recover and not be like the end of the world for Bitcoin, but it would just be like a really quick, sharp downward motion. Turns out that yes, this was historically Bitcoin's biggest flash crash ever. Now, it wasn't like going down a whole bunch, because it wasn't a very long duration of a crash. It was a flash crash, so it was very fast. But apparently that was the biggest in Bitcoin's history ever. So that happened last month. I also said that despite that, I saw an overall sideways volatility for Bitcoin, which is exactly what happened. So for November moving forward, I do see more volatility downward. It's very possible we could see Bitcoin going below 100K. And it just seems very volatile for most of November, but it seems to recover by the end of the month. So it could be a potentially good time to pick up some Bitcoin at some lower prices, potentially. Stock market, last month I said that it was going sideways. It seems to have been going sideways, except for the last couple days it went up a little bit, but for most of the month it was sideways. So that was mostly correct. Maybe just a little off at the very end of the month. But regardless, moving forward for November, I do see it continuing to just do the same thing. I said this like 3 months ago or something, that I just see it going pretty much sideways for the next 3-4 months or so. So I continue to see that being the case. Now, here's something very interesting about the weather. Last month I was talking about, actually, that wasn't last month. That was for the September psychic prediction video. Before September started, I said, strangely enough, I said there were secret ET battles going on in the sky that were resulting in shifts in the weather and the Earth acting weird, specifically within the, not so much magnetic field, but yes, magnetic field, but also energetic field of the Earth, basically the aura of the Earth. Now, this was actually before I even knew about Three Eye Atlas, but I do believe that Three Eye Atlas is related to this, as well as I've discussed on my Patreon page in depth. But also I talked about how Three Eye Atlas seems to be coming by partially for many different reasons, but one thing that's happening is it's energetically shifting things and relieving what I saw as light beings, and I don't really know much about them, just that they were light beings that were holding the Earth's energy field together in areas where it was kind of falling apart. And this was basically to preserve the Earth and stop horrible things from happening. That would be something like the biblical flood. Now, recently on CBS News, I found this article that says, and this is a quote, "Satellites reveal weak spot in Earth's magnetic field keeps growing." They say there's something special happening. This was apparently in the South Atlantic, or this was, they call it the South Atlantic weak spot anomaly. And I believe that this is the area that I was seeing as being held together by these light beings. Of course, they're not going to report that on the news. They're not going to be aware of that. But, energy has an effect on the physical world, obviously. So that's what I see going on there. Since I've said that, and I've been saying we will be seeing more natural disasters because of that, especially floods in particular. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of that happening. So, apparently, above normal Atlantic hurricane season and record regional rainfall events. Even on my social media accounts, I just randomly saw people posting videos of how much it was raining. That was earlier in October, but regardless, that's been going on since I made that prediction. and I do see this continuing. LA apparently had evacuation warnings from an unusual atmospheric storm. Eastern Mexico had a death toll above 60 due to heavy rains and mudslides in October. Alaska was airlifting hundreds of people from storm-devastated coastal villages, among other things. I'm not going to go over all of these situations. But also, one thing that stands out too is the Philippines had an earthquake. And last I checked, the death toll was 79. It may be way beyond that now, I'm not sure. But there was 1,271 injured people, and it was said to be the strongest earthquake in that specific area, historically speaking, ever. Last month I also said Ethiopia was showing up in the news for some reason, and I wasn't sure why, but there's also been earthquakes in Ethiopia, as well as threat of war over a Red Sea port. Political tensions are rising, involving drone strikes, and they're building a huge dam apparently over the Nile River, which I didn't realize the Nile River went through Ethiopia, but I'm not very good at geography. But anyways, this river actually flows from Ethiopia to Egypt. I thought it went the other direction, but apparently not. But anyways, they built a dam which could affect the Nile in Egypt and further down, or before Egypt as well. And so this is creating a lot of tension and potential war. So that seems to be a situation brewing in Ethiopia. So, to summarize this month, there's a lot of predictions from last month. I made a lot of predictions that are relevant for what's happening in the future. So a lot of what I did in this video was me just kind of going over a lot of that because it's relevant to where we're heading. So sorry for going over so much of that in this video. But regardless, just to summarize what's going on for November coming up here, is there are two sides of this global conflict realistically. The Western European and the BRICS nations, including Russia and China. And what we're seeing is economic situations, economic uncertainty, military associations, basically shaping the climate of the world chess game, you could say. I do get the sense that uncertainty is in the air, especially about how people are projecting into the future. People's future plans, people thinking about how things will go, especially within the financial markets. That seems to be a little chaotic for the month of November. So I do get the sense that this month of November coming up here is good for ignoring those global conflicts and just focusing on you. I also got the sense that the month will be really good for working on and focusing on your necessities, the things that you need. Focusing on those rather than trying to be too ambitious or trying to jump the gun or trying to rush into things. Instead, just focusing on basic comfort seems to be the best thing you could do, as far as when I asked about what is good for the month. What is bad for the month is putting yourself into debt. So if you're kind of taking a financial gamble, maybe it's not a good idea to do during November. I get the sense that there could be unstable financial situations ahead, but that those do seem to smooth out maybe in December, maybe a little bit in December, but then January, February, and possibly March as well seem a little chaotic. But then moving forward from there, it does seem that then things stabilize more financially speaking. Also, back to November, a bad month for rushing into things or spreading yourself too thin. Basically, just be a little cautious. Maybe with your financial situation, be a little conservative with your money, I guess you could say. Might be a good opportunity to do some trades if you're able to take advantage of volatility, though. So the overall advice for the month, is, when I tuned in and asked, what came to me was, be who you want to be. Stop worrying. Future plans may get in the way of you being you. So, like, if you're focusing too much on the future and where you're trying to go, you might kind of lose yourself to that. So, don't forget to enjoy your time. The future outlook will settle more in the coming months. And recently on my Patreon page, I've been discussing the mindset of the corrupt elite. What's going on with a lot of the situations with pedophile networks beyond just Epstein. The future of the world, specifically rising sea levels and the desert-like climates that may make it hard for growing crops, which I've seen years ago in previous predictions, basically affecting the future until around the year 2040 or so. And of course, if you want to see or read that information, you can join my Patreon for free and have access to some of my free content, or well, all of my free content. But if you would like to see the paid content, you can also sign up for a 7-day free trial and just cancel before you get charged, and it's free. So I encourage you to do that, just to check it out at least. I also have hundreds of crypto predictions, as always, Bitcoin updates, and blind readings, which is basically a protocol borrowed from remote viewing, where you come up with a bunch of random digit numbers and you associate those with the target or the person or the thing that you're reading. And that way, it's a blind reading, meaning that I randomly select one of these random digit numbers and I do a reading on that, just by itself. Whatever shows up, shows up. And then when I'm done, I use AI to do this, and I ask, I did a reading on this number. Who was that? Who did I do that reading on? And then it will tell me the name of the person that I did the reading on that was associated with that number. For the last month, I did a blind reading on Tara Reid, or I don't know how to pronounce this. Tara Reid? I don't know. But either way, she was a person who claimed to have been sexually assaulted by Joe Biden a long time ago. I did a reading on that. If you want to find out about that, you can. I also did a blind reading on Daniel Lizzet, also known as the dark journalist who talks about UFOs and what would be known as conspiracy theories. Not that they are necessarily not true. And also Sadhguru, who is a Indian guru, as you can probably tell. Coming up here, I have already done the blind reading on Satya Sai Baba, who is another Indian spiritual leader from the past. And that will be coming out soon. I have not posted it yet, but that will come out next month, I believe. So if you appreciate this video and this information for free, give this video a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. Subscribe for monthly predictions every month before the month starts. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.